The Monday, May 15th, 2017 Board of Commissioner meeting. Before we get started, I want to let you folks know that we attended an open house at the Jarvisburg Color School this afternoon. What a treat that was. If you ever get an opportunity, please take a few minutes and go in there. It's a great part of our history, and it's a pleasure to go in there and see what they've done with it. So we appreciate that invitation very much. Also, Scoutmaster Russ Beatty is here with his Troop 182 to work on their merit badges. If I can get all those scouts to come up and stand here in the middle. And we're going to have Reverend Frank Muster give us the invocation, and then the scouts are going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So please get everyone to stand.
In Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse 8, it says, "The Lord himself goes before you, and he will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged." Let's pray. Our gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for this opportunity to come together as a community to discuss business, to discuss the county moving forward in the lives of our residents. Father, I just ask that you would place your hand of blessing upon this room tonight, that we would be in unity, that we would listen to each other and the discussions that will be had, and Father, that the best outcome will be decided on. Bless each and every commissioner that sits on this panel, for their work is hard, it's tough, but it'll long endure. So Lord, bless us. Keep us strong, keep us safe. And Father, we lift up those fallen officers throughout our state, our country, as we remember them and their families tonight. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Please join in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Troop 182. You may be seated. First item on our agenda is public comment. I'm sorry. First item on our agenda is the approval of the agenda.
Mr. Chairman, if we could add to new business, make it C2 economic development to the additional already Board of Adjustment.
You would like that under board appointments?
Board appointments, yes. Be, I guess, number 2.
Okay.
Motion for approval.
I would like to make another amendment to the agenda. I would like to add to the agenda budget amendment for Lower Currituck Volunteer Fire Department for parking area grant agreement. I would like to add that to the consent agenda. Are there any other amendments?
Motion for approval.
Second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Approved. Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Next item is public comment. I've got several people signed up for public comment this evening. If you would, limit your public comments to 3 minutes. There is a timer up here. The yellow light lets you know when you're getting close to your time. With respect to other people, if you would please pay attention to the red light, that means your time is up. And I appreciate that. And the first person I will ask is Eric Remington. If you would, please state your name and address, please.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. My name is Eric Remington. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Ward & Smith out of New Bern, North Carolina. I represent the Currituck Club Property Owners Association, and I'm here to talk to you all about item B on the new business agenda, which is the proposed amendment to Section 1063 of the ordinance. Just to give you a little bit of background, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with, the Currituck Club is a sound-side community, but also has ocean access, and was developed in 1998 by Currituck Associate Residential Partnership. As part of that, there was a 100-foot wide beach access that was owned by the Currituck Hunting Club, Shooting Club. And, Currituck Associate Residential Partnership ended up purchasing that. That was developed as Currituck Club was developed in phases, that was developed into the Currituck Club Ocean subdivision. And as part of that, there are parcels there which are along the county's beach southern access, which the Currituck Club uses in addition to that access to basically offer amenities for its members and guests. It's been that area has been treated as part of the Currituck Club by the county and by everybody else since it was created back in the 1990s. And when the Currituck Ocean subdivision was created. What I'm specifically here to talk about tonight is the proposed ordinance amendment. We believe that the proposed ordinance amendment would adversely affect the Currituck Club operations because right now the Currituck Club has a valet service that's part of its amenities, the recreational amenities that it offers to its members and guests. And basically, if this ordinance amendment is passed, that service and amenity would be affected by this ordinance adversely. That would affect the rental values and ability to market properties within the Currituck Club. We believe that this amendment has been generated by the concerns of a few oceanfront or oceanside neighbors, property owners, who have a specific economic interest in basically seeing that the Currituck Club is not able to continue its operations the way it has for the past 20 or so years. The public access is there to service the Soundside communities like the Currituck Club. Pine Island and the rest of those communities that are on the ocean front, they have direct access, but this is what the Currituck Club is there for. If this ordinance amendment is passed, it would severely limit and restrict what the Currituck Club is doing, and we don't believe that the commissioners should pass an amendment like this because it would adversely affect that. So we'd ask that you table that or that you reject it outright, and those are my comments. Thank you all for listening.
Next will be Heidi Pacello.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, first I want to thank all of you as well as the county staff who have been very cooperative with us and I think very productive and proactive. We have together, I think, made very good changes and very positive changes for those who visit Currituck County beaches and those who live there. With that said, I think that the text amendment to Section 1063 may inadvertently take us a few steps backwards. This beach access is used, of course, for those that are coming to Currituck County beaches to visit, and it is also used by the Currituck Club, as you know. I was going to read you just a wonderful email from an owner in the club, but I think that it is probably going to be in one of your or all of your inboxes at some point when you get to see them. My point is this. We are proud of this operation, and it is a sound, wise decision to continue this operation. But to change it with the text amendment, we are removing the beach valet aspect out of the entire operation. This has been a welcome addition. It is well run, it is well managed, and it provides advantages to those coming, not only just as tourists, but also as those who own in the club. And to remove it would be highly detrimental. We would lose the management of the area. It is not going to reduce the number of people coming in to use the public beach access, but what it will do is remove the management of that area. And we have made it safer. We've provided with the beach handicapped accessibility component an aspect of it that has never been introduced before. So since 2015, when we introduced this component, it has been extraordinarily well received, and we have pulled people from perhaps down in Duck up to the Currituck County beaches to stay here with us, to purchase properties with us, because this is a very well received program. My second question is this. This is May 15th. We are in full-blown operation and getting ready for the season. To propose the text amendment that would remove the beach valet component from us is highly unordinary at this point. We have major commitments, financial and otherwise, as well as advertisements. We have guests that are coming, whether to stay at their own home or to stay for the week, that are preparing to have this service available to them. So to remove it at this late date with these great financial commitments already having been made would place an undue burden upon us, as well as the guests that are planning to come and experience that service that has been so well received. So my question is if this would be more appropriate to table this until we can continue to work with the county staff, as has been our history, to work together for a positive outcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Priscilla. Next would be David Knock.
Good evening, everybody. Dave Knock, 573 Hunt Club Drive, Corolla, North Carolina. 19 years there, people, in the Currituck Club. So I've seen this valet system move from day one. And I guess I'm going to speak from the heart on this and tell you how it would impact my family, and then you think about other families like mine who are also renting houses who you all get occupancy tax from. Okay, my family is my wife and myself. My wife is handicapped, 2 handicaps, physical and mental. I have an older son, 39 years old. He comes with his wife and our granddaughters, 7 and 5 years old. They get in the trolley. All of us go down to the beach, right? We get off the trolley, and we have this valet system that helps my son, John, who may be carrying chairs, to put the chairs in the ATV to get him to the beach. Therefore, he can devote his time to the granddaughters, 5 and 7, hold their hands walking down there. Now, that's important. The other thing is, my wife, because she has severe difficulty in walking, the ATV can take her down to the beach. This helps me. It can help anybody in the community, and it is needed. And I think you need to strongly object to this amendment. And I appreciate your time, and have a wonderful evening and a good discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Knott. Next would be Christopher Mark.
Good evening. My name is Chris Merrick. I'm part owner of Ocean Atlantic Rentals, and that address at our warehouse is 107 Shores Avenue in Point Harbor. We are one of the largest equipment rental firms on the East Coast, and so I'm coming to you from that direction this evening. I'm here tonight speaking against the proposed draft amendment to the Code of Ordinances for beach driving on the paved areas of Corolla. Firstly, my company sets up in Dare and Currituck County hundreds of chairs and umbrellas for customers each summer week. And we have operated in the 6 to 7:30 a.m. setup time and 5:30 to 7 p.m. takedown time rules since those were implemented. And it was great when that happened because sheriff's deputies came around, they brought us a copy of the code, they explained it to us. It was really handled great by the county. Would trucks and ATVs and vehicles on the beach more frequently make it easier for us to do our business and the PUDs? Absolutely. But I can tell you that they're not necessary, and that's because we've lived it and as one of the largest companies executed it. I feel that safety risks and the volume of folks on our beaches now in the in-season is just a recipe for disaster to have more vehicles out on the beach. Secondly, the proposed amendment creates an unfair advantage for the chair and umbrella subcontractors of the PUDs. And Ocean Atlantic Rentals, with its 2 brick and mortar stores in Corolla and 2 warehouses in Currituck County, will be at a severe disadvantage. With what's being proposed, I see that the PUDs can have a vehicle sitting on the beach all day, serving customers in a way that I can't. And I think it would be great if they're allowed to have a truck sit out there full of chairs or umbrellas or kayaks, then I'd just love the same right. Armed with an iPad and a cell phone, I can take money on the beach too. Oh, but wait, we're not supposed to be doing that. But I would just encourage you folks to take a look at the beaches. It's happening all over the place. It's blatantly obvious. And, I'd really like to see enforcement to make it be stopped. I don't think what's being proposed is about trash removal or handicapped beach access. I never want to see the handicapped be restricted from getting to the beach. But I would ask in this amendment, if it was revised, it would clearly state that those 2 explicit uses are for the PUD vehicles, and clearly state that it does not allow commercial business to be conducted from those vehicles. Or better yet, let's just keep the same old 6 a.m. to 7:30, I set up, 5:30 to 7 p.m., I take it down, and keep the commercial vehicles off the beaches, including the PUD vehicles that are now being proposed to sit there all day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Merrick. Marge Searing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everybody. I am a resident of the Currituck Club year-round and pay my taxes to this county, as well as in the summer rent my home. So have the advantage of the occupancy tax coming into this county as well when I am not there. People book my home the previous summer for the following summer. I am fully booked 16 weeks. And all of those people signed up well before this notion of changing our amenities on the beach had surfaced. I am looking at a situation personally where I am sure I will be refunding thousands of dollars of rent from people who are unhappy with the lack of amenities and lack of access that we were offering in our advertising on our websites. So for me personally, this is very concerning and a serious hardship. But more importantly, the access that we're being provided on the Sound, as well as others who are coming up, I think is of extreme importance to anyone who's interested in visiting Currituck County. We have all of these communities on the ocean side where there is no access. You've done a great job of improving the northern entrance. This was the kind of service that was being offered on the southern entrance, and I think it's really important to preserve both of those if we want to continue to attract the tourism to our county over there that we're all benefiting from and for which we're getting an enormous source of revenue. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Searing. Bruce Walton.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. My name is Bruce Walton. I live at 675 Hunt Club Drive in Corolla, and I have been a property owner since 2002. I rent my home 15 to 17 weeks every single summer since I built the home. I rent and manage the property myself. I have all the income that goes to this county, and I'm just here to add to what everyone else has said from the Currituck Club, that this is a true amenity to the club, to the guests of the club. It impacts the property values, it impacts the taxes, it impacts the whole beach experience of all the guests in the Currituck Club. And I can say that of all the inquiries, I do the rentals myself, I do not use a property management company, that consistently, I would say 60 to 75% of the guests that I get every year inquiring about renting my property have never been to the Outer Banks before. So there's a lot of new tourist dollars and people that are experiencing the Outer Banks for the first time. These amenities are extremely important for us to maintain property values in the Currituck Club, and I think all the services are professionally handled, and I just ask you to reconsider and reject this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walton. I'm going to give this one a try. Kathy Laukel?
That's close.
Not bad.
Not bad, not bad.
Okay.
Good evening, Chairman and Commissioners. I'm a little bit of a different case. I am at 680 Wild Cherry Court, but I'm actually a new resident to your county. I just moved here in November. And we actually selected the Currituck Club for the very fact that we could enjoy the golf and the sound and the beach access. And we've chosen this home as our retirement home. So we're with you for several years, we hope. But again, it was such an important amenity when we looked at all the different properties and even different beach areas in South Carolina and further south. The reason we felt that this was so much our spot was because of the combination of amenities. And I just want to point that out so that as you look at bringing new residents into your community, I think it's a key value proposition that the Currituck Club brings to a new resident looking for property.
Thank you. Arthur Cox.
Good evening. My name is Arthur Cox. My wife and I have a home at 512 Magnolia Way, excuse me, in the Currituck Club. We bought in the Currituck Club about 10 years ago, and in large part the decision to buy there had to do with the amenities that were offered at the beach access. We have a large family. They come down on and off all summer. They have lots of friends that come down. There are lots of visitors in our area that come down there from homes that are both owned as well as rentals. And those amenities at the beachfront are what the people are looking for that are renting on the Soundside communities. That's what we're there for. Without that, quite frankly, getting large families back and forth from the beach is very difficult. I think this is an amendment that's going to do nothing but detract from the experience of the visitors coming to the Outer Banks, coming to Corolla. I think the last thing that anybody wants to see is a less of an experience for these people, and be taking that kind of information back home to others. It's a wonderful area. It's a wonderful amenity. It doesn't impact the other houses in that area. These aren't there's not loud noises. There's not issues that come from this. There's no question. It attracts people. And I think the only thing to be gained from not getting away with this amendment is the fact that you're going to end up with less people on the beach. And I don't believe that having less people on the beach, less people that come to Corolla, is in the overall best public interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cox. That's all I have signed up for public comments. I saw a few people come in late. Was there anyone else that would like to speak? With that, I will close the public comments. Thank you very much. Moving on to administrative reports. Currituck County Annual Stewardship Report presented by Kathy Davison, Executive Director of the Albemarle Commission.
Thank you, Chairman Haynick and Commissioners. It's always good to be here in Currituck, and especially good to be here tonight. As you know, there's a lot going on in our region, and I'm pleased to lead the Albemarle Commission and talk about what we're doing and how we're doing it, and the services that we're providing Currituck County and your residents and businesses herewith. First and foremost, I need to apologize, and there is a typo in your report. I flip-flopped the number of clients that are receiving home-delivered meals and congregate meals, and that was brought to my attention by your senior center director, and I thank Stacy for doing that. But looking at senior nutrition, last year we had home-delivered meals. 7,953 meals were delivered to 80 clients. And then we had congregate meals at the senior center. 11,002 meals were served to 247 residents, and the county share of that service was $50,080. And thank you for your contribution for that. It's also important to note that Canteen, who provides the meal service within the jail, and the correctional facility here in Currituck also provides meals under a contract, so we're supporting a Currituck County business. Looking further on the Area Agency on Aging and the Home and Community Care Block Grant, as you know, we provide medical transportation. While we do provide that, the committee has decided they do not want to utilize their funds for that. They evaluate every year the contributions that are received as well as the allocation from the state, what services they want for the residents in Currituck County. General transportation, there were 23 clients that received 1,833 rides. And then we had 2 clients that received 167 hours of adult day health care. And then in-home aid, we had 38 clients that received 2,748 hours of in-home aid. That's so important in order to have our seniors maintain their homes and their quality of life in their homes without being transferred to a nursing center or long-term care facility. And then it's exciting to see that we had 34 participants in the senior games. And I have to tell you, one of the things that we did differently this year is we moved the opening ceremonies were the week of spring break for our youth. And the youth throughout the region volunteered in senior games. And it truly is exciting to see the youth enthralled with the seniors and vice versa, and that communication. And I think that goes a long way for goodwill between our youth as well as our seniors. Then when we look at our family caregiver program, caregiver supplies and consumer-directed needs as well as nutritional supplements, we had 4 clients that received 282 items or supplies, and that could be incontinence supplies, cases of nutritional supplements, Ensure, or medical equipment that we've had donated, or they sign those items out. And then our regional long-term care ombudsman, our ombudsman, Brandy Jordan, is a certified social worker. She handles complaints. She provides training in services. She also works on technical assistance, not only for the residents, but also for the facilities within Currituck County. And she provided 60 services. The reason we do not put the number of clients is because of HIPAA and confidentiality. She is not able to communicate those numbers to us, just the number of services. And providing those services, the county's match was $15,852. Thank you again for your support of those services. And an item that I know of, Chairman Hainig, is dear to your heart is workforce development. And this past year, you had 1,610 residents, be it youth or adults, receive 8,711 services. That could be resume building, could be training. It could be working smart, which is the soft skills training many of our businesses and counties have requested. It also could be looking for jobs and finding placement or education. It could also be child care and transportation. And then moving forward, and all at no cost to the county. And then you had 2 businesses here in Currituck County that were recipients of the Income Net Worker Training. We had Blue Water Restoration, who received a $10,000 grant to train their current employees on new processes and technology. And then we had an $8,151 grant for Income Net training to Carolina Marine Structures. And prior to that training taking place, the employee that was going to receive it had moved out of the area. So even though the money's there, it was designated for Currituck County. So it's exciting to see those services and the employees that are receiving jobs. Of course, we're working with businesses to fill positions that they have open and continue to support the residents and youth within Currituck County. And one of the items that Workforce Development is working with our schools on is the Working Smart and Soft Skills training. A lot of people say, well, it would be good to have someone that showed up to work, that knew how to talk, that knew how to answer the phone and was polite, but they don't have the skills. I can train them. But how do you get a student and a youth person to that point? Well, we've partnered with the career and technical education programs in the high school to provide that training right there in school. The workforce development is paying for that training, and that will commence this fall. It truly is exciting to see those skills being provided to our youth within the school system. Then when we look at the Rural Planning Organization and planning services, we've provided 65 services to the county through the C2P or the county transportation plans, through attending merger meetings, coordinating the project scoring. Our planning director does a great deal for a staff of one. She is the planning director for all 10 of the counties within the region. And your match for that was $4,225. Thank you again. Then when we look at economic development, grant administration, advocacy, strategic planning, meeting facilitation, quarterly managers meeting, and policy review and analysis, I would be remiss if I did not thank you for your assistance to the commission. In the fall of 2015, we took on a major initiative. Not only was our 10 counties, but 5 additional counties, called the Balancing Nature and Commerce Initiative. You had Commissioner Payment was in attendance, and your planning director, Ben Woody, was there. And part of that initiative was broadband planning. We also have water quality, community assets, historic assets, as well as branding for the entire region. And I will have to say, your planning director said, how can we help you support this process? And they've been facilitating the mapping for the community assets. And thank you, Ben, for you and your staff for doing that. And I mentioned to Commissioner Payment about we were on one of the work groups for broadband of not letting that sit on the shelf. And it's exciting to see that broadband planning is occurring within our region, and particularly in Currituck County. So thank you for the continued momentum of that. And then we continue to work with the county. We did submit an urgent repair program grant, however, it was not awarded, and we continue to work with the state on how we can support and strengthen our grant applications, and then looking at coastal management and water quality within the region. And the regional dues for those services, as well as general education and meetings, including the Monday morning briefing, is $17,049. So I just want to look at the bottom line with you and the return on your investment to the residents within the community. Your county share of the services provided was $87,206. You had 32,827 units of service, be it a home-delivered meal, congregate meal, transportation, adult daycare, in-home aid, or family caregiver services. And then looking at your rural planning and economic development and workforce. And you served 2,041 clients. The cost to the county is $2.66 per service. If you want to put that into perspective, One meal at the senior center or that's home delivered is $5. So a little over half of the service that's provided is what it costs the county compared to the whole amount. And we thank you from the bottom of our heart for all that you do, your continued support. And we look forward to being your commission, continuing to be your commission, and providing the services to you as well as to the constituents and businesses within Currituck County. Thank you so much.
Anyone have any questions for Ms. Davidson?
Just keep up the good work and maybe your Monday morning videos that you see and everything is very important.
Good.
Keep up the good work. That's it.
Thank you. I just have one quick reminder. You have a flyer in front of you, and there's some up here. On Thursday, June 15th, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., there is a Step Out Against Elder Abuse walk. This is the 4th annual walk that we do to promote awareness of elder abuse. And there's a luncheon provided. Everyone is welcome, and wear purple and come to the Elder Abuse Awareness Walk. Thank you so much.
Effie, if I may.
Yes.
I'm glad to see the Work Smart program finally get into the schools. That was something we spent a lot of years working on. I'm glad to see that actually start to happen. And all these numbers are great, and they all say a lot for everything you do there. But the way that y'all do it there is just amazing. The tireless efforts y'all put into there, the countless hours, that's what makes it all happen.
Good.
So ours back to you is thank you so much for that.
Thank you. I'll pass that on to our team. We have a lot of fun at the commission, and we truly enjoy our service that we provide.
Yeah.
Thank
you
you.
so much. With that, we'll move on to public hearings. Next item is PB 17-02, Currituck County Sign Ordinance Text Amendment. Request to amend the Unified Development Ordinance, Chapter 5, Development Standards, and Chapter 10, Definitions and Measurement for a substantial rewrite of the county's signage regulations to comply with a recent Supreme Court decision. And with that, I'll hand it over to Mr. Woody.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a substantial in scope amendment to our sign ordinance, but it's actually substantively we're just making changes to address a ruling from a recent, or not so recent now, but a somewhat recent Supreme Court decision in a case called Reed versus the town of Gilbert, Arizona. And what happened in that case, it told us that local governments, when you're regulating signage, particularly non-commercial signage, your regulations have to be content neutral. And so what that means in kind of plain language is if I have to read the sign to apply the regulation, then it's unconstitutional. That decision did leave some ability, we think, for continued regulation of commercial type signage. So you're not going to see really any changes to how we regulate commercial signage, but what you're going to see is a pretty substantial departure on how we manage non-commercial signage. And what we're going to do is I'm going to walk you through, and we went through this with the board at your January retreat, and you gave us some direction out of that retreat on how to kind of move this forward. So I'm tonight just going to walk you through the ordinance and make sure everybody on the board understands what we're proposing, and also give the public a chance to kind of understand some of these changes. So again, you could regulate non-commercial signage in terms of time, content, and place. You just can't regulate the message. So right now in our ordinance, and there's a copy in your agenda package, but you can see the current ordinance. There's a table, and there's a whole list of signs that are allowed without a sign permit. But what you'll see in that ordinance right now is every one of those signs has a picture, and so you literally have to read the sign to know what the standard is. So that entire section is at this point unconstitutional. There may be a few things that aren't, but generally it is. So what we're proposing to do is essentially strike that entire section, and we're going to handle non-commercial signage in this way. An example of a non-commercial sign could be maybe a real estate for sale sign, maybe a contractor sign. You're putting it there because you're selling your house, or you're putting it there because you're doing work on the house. A campaign, a political season type sign could be non-commercial speech. Just a message. I just may want to put a sign on my yard that says whatever I want it to say. As long as the sign isn't out there for the purpose of attracting commercial business, to a commercial operation, then it's a non-commercial sign. So there's a lot of things that get church signs. If I put a sign out advertising my church on a certain day, that's a non-commercial sign. A lot of the events we have in the county, the special events that are done by nonprofits, those too would be non-commercial signs. So it captures a real broad cross-section of different types of signage. What we decided to do based on conversations with the Board of Commissioners and just kind of looking into best practices is essentially what we're going to do is you're going to have to allow every property most likely to have one non-commercial sign, and that's what we've proposed. So on its face, you can have one non-commercial sign on your property. That can be whatever you want it to be. If the board wanted to, you could go further and try to create different numbers and sizes by zoning districts, perhaps. Again, you can regulate location, just not content. So what the staff's done is we went through a process in the ordinance of saying that essentially each property can have one temporary sign that's 8 square feet in area and no more than 4 feet in height. That's a typical kind of sandwich board type sign or a political sign or whatever you see, any kind of standard kind of message sign you see placed out. But what we had to then do is allow the ability for property owners to add additional signs in certain circumstances. So for example, if you have your house listed for sale, then you can add one additional non-commercial sign that's 8 square feet in size and 4 area in height. And of course, that additional sign would need to be removed within 5 days of selling your house. But here's the thing to keep in mind is if my house is, so I may have a non-commercial sign in front of my yard, whatever it says, then I put my house on the market for sale. So presumably I'll put a for sale sign in my yard. But remember, we can't tell them the content of that. So having my house for sale lets me have that second non-commercial sign, but I can actually have whatever I want on the two signs. So again, you're finding things to trigger a property owner's ability to have an additional non-commercial sign, because we can't just say anymore you can have a real estate sign when your house is for sale, because we can't regulate the content. An additional thing the staff thought made sense was to allow one additional temporary sign if you have an active building permit on your property. If you think about most homes that are under construction, you will generally see some sort of sign in the yard, construction by whatever contractors, and that's usually on the property while the addition's occurring or whatever it is happening. And then in this particular case, it says that once the certificate of compliance is issued, so the project's done, that contractor sign is removed within 10 days. So walking it through, I can have a non-commercial sign on my property. If I have it for sale, I can have 2 non-commercial signs. And if for some reason I'm also doing an addition or something that requires a building permit, I could presumably have 3 non-commercial signs that are 8 square feet in size and 4 feet in height. That's probably not likely. It's probably not a whole lot of instances where you're going to see all 3 of those things happening at once. But what we wanted to do is make sure essentially that if you have a property, you can have some flexibility in terms of signage on your property, and the ordinance remains constitutional. Now, another thing we added is the ability to have up to 3 additional temporary signs on a property for a period of 30 days prior to an election involving candidates or an issue on the ballot of an election. And then those signs are moved within 10 days of the conclusion of that election. And those are, again, 8 square feet and 4 feet in height. So that means in a residential area, for example, during an election, I get my one non-commercial sign, and if I really want to support a candidate, I could add 3 additional signs to my property. So I could have 4 8 square foot signs on my property during a campaign season. But remember, we can't regulate content, so while everybody in the county can have these 4 signs during a campaign season, I don't have to use them for political signs if I don't want to. It just gives me a time frame in which I can have the additional non-commercial signs. Another thing we did that the board suggested, and you see this in a lot of ordinances actually, is allowing additional signage if you have a lot of road frontage. So if you had a farm or a property that had 1,000 feet of road frontage, what this ordinance would do was allow, beyond your one non-commercial sign, you could add 1 additional non-commercial sign for every 100 feet of road frontage. So if you think about it, if I'm in a subdivision and I've got a 100-foot wide lot, I can have 1 sign. So presumably, if I rode down a subdivision road, I could have 1 non-commercial sign every 100 feet. So you basically just take that and apply it to a large lot with a large road frontage. So if I had a 1,000 foot of road frontage, I could have presumably 10 non-commercial signs. Now, what we did on the larger road frontages is allowed for a larger sign. So if I had a lot of road frontage, I could actually have a 32 square foot sign. So again, if you think about the properties and think about, just think about a political election, or even think about a nonprofit event, you tend to see those bigger signs not in the middle of a residential neighborhood, but on our road frontages on the highway. So we're suggesting for owners that have larger frontages, they be allowed to have a 32 square foot non-commercial sign. And then finally, we have another addition for home occupations. If you have a home occupation, our ordinance used to allow you to have a sign on your building. We are proposing to continue to allow that. So if I had a permitted compliant home occupation, I could have a 6 square foot sign on the building, or a 6 square foot sign that's freestanding in the yard. So you can have a sign for a home occupation, which again we're considering to be non-commercial because it's still the primary use of the property is your home-based business. And then lastly, one of the things that has been allowed in the old ordinance that we're carrying forward is we allow our subdivisions to have up to 4 flags or banners allowed per entrance of a subdivision. So really, the example to think of is over on the Outer Banks. A lot of times you'll see flag poles at the entrance to Monterey Shores, for example. So we've put in a requirement that allows subdivision entrances to retain at least 4 flags. So you could have flags as part of your entry decor for your subdivision. Those are all the non-commercial sign allowances. They're all on this slide here, and you can see kind of the sum total of it. It's a difficult thing to try to regulate because I don't think you want to totally ban non-commercial signage, because that would mean that nobody could have any type, not a political sign, not a real estate sign, nothing on their property. So what I think you've got to do is find a way to allow people to have non-commercial signs, perhaps allow them to have additional non-commercial signs when they're doing things like selling a house or remodeling, but doing so in a way that also doesn't let somebody have just unlimited signs all over their property all year round, which is one of the things we've tried to get away from in this county in terms of, improving the appearance of our corridor neighborhoods. So that's kind of how it all lays out for the non-commercial signage portion of this. A couple other things, and we can come back if you have questions on that. We're also continuing to allow temporary signs in commercial zoning districts. That's something the county's always allowed, but you see it in here. It's just been separated from the non-commercial signage, because we can regulate the number and size and location of commercial signage on a property. So if you're a business or a commercially zoned property, in addition to your main principal sign, you can have up to 40 square feet of temporary signs on your business property. So if you think about it, a lot of times for a gas station, for example, you may see one little portable sign that advertises whatever they're selling inside. So we've seen that a lot in our county, but we carried that forward. Another thing is the roadside market signs. The farmers markets have an exception where they can basically have unlimited signs, off-premise advertising the roadside market. That's a commercial type signage allowance, so we just carried that forward as it was written, so that remains the way it is today in this particular proposal. Another thing I want to cover, because I just want to make sure everybody kind of understands what's in this, is we used to separate institutional signs. So institution is primarily churches, but it could be schools or other types of institutional uses. We used to set those apart from commercial signage, which means I would have to read the sign to apply the regulation, and we were actually not allowing institutional signs to have as much signage as commercial businesses, so we can't do that anymore. So what we've done on the institutional signs is if the institution is in a commercial zoning district, it can have the same type of signage as a commercial business can have. So if I'm a church and I'm zoned commercial, I can have a 128 square foot sign just like any other business can. But what we did do, a lot of our institutions were in residentially zoned areas. We retained the historical standard of 48 square feet or 8 feet in height in a residential area. So if I'm a church or an institution in a residentially zoned area, I can continue to have my 48 square foot sign. So the change is that if my church is actually zoned commercial, I'll now be able to have the same size sign that the business owner can have. So again, that removes that kind of distinction between commercial and non-commercial. And lastly, the last thing I want to cover specifically in this ordinance amendment is special event signs. That's always kind of a big topic in the county, and the planning board really kind of dialed into this. The staff had initially, we were just going to remove the special event signage allowance, but they proposed to keep it back in, and I think what they recommended makes sense. So in the ordinance today, if you have a special event, and most of those are nonprofits, they tend to be charitable organizations that have events, they could have up to 60 signs. So you would go see all these signs placed up and down the highway. That doesn't need to be there anymore now because every property in the county can have a non-commercial sign. So if you're a nonprofit, you can simply go to the properties and ask them, will you put my whatever, Currituck Business Expo, will you put my little yard sign on your property? That would be my one non-commercial sign. So there's really no mechanism to necessarily limit those nonprofit signs anymore, other than if I'm having a special event, I've got to put it on somebody's property with their permission, and it's got to be out of the right-of-way. That's the big thing most of these organizations do. They put all the signs in the right-of-way, which still isn't allowed. But the other thing that happens is we have commercial special events as well. So there's some events in the county where they're not a nonprofit, so they are subject to commercial sign requirements. The planning board proposed to continue to allow the commercial special events to have up to 3 off-premise signs. So if I were a business and I were having some sort of special event, an oyster roast, whatever it may be, I could have up to 3 32 square feet off-premise signs advertising my commercial special event. Now, again, the commercial special events go through a permit process, so they've got to come into the county and get permitting. So I just want to make sure everybody understands that. So previously some of the commercial special events were actually putting 40 and 60 signs out. But what this ordinance does, it preserves that allowance for the nonprofits, and it's going to limit the commercial special events to 3 signs. So that's a little bit of a change on both ends of that from how we've traditionally done it. There's other things we've modified some of the definitions to reflect the changes in the ordinance. There's been some of the typos and some of the language that we thought we could reword a little bit to improve the way it kind of reads. We modified that, but none of that was, I think, substantive. I think I've covered the main point of this ordinance. The planning board heard this in their April meeting, and they did make the change to the special event signs that I just went through, but otherwise they recommended it for approval with a unanimous vote. Staff recommends approval of this. I think we have to do something to make our ordinance constitutional first. But second of all, I think we've crafted this in a way that gives some flexibility to property owners, but also tries to manage the volume of temporary signs in the county. We think it's consistent with the land use plan. In your staff report, there is a suggested language from the staff of a consistency statement. So we've outlined how we think it meets the criteria for land use plan consistency. And with that, I can answer any questions you have.
Mr. Woody, I got one. So just covering your special event signs, one of the things that was brought up by the planning board was signs in Corolla, or the Outer Banks. And was that included here? I thought I saw it in here.
It was, correct. So if you're a commercial event, you could have up to 3 signs on the mainland or the Outer Banks. The difference they did, and I'm glad you pointed out, the difference is on the mainland the signs can be erected up to 17 days before the event. And removed within 8 days after the event. On the Outer Banks, they're erected 7 days before the event and removed within 2 days after the event. The reason the window's shorter on the Outer Banks is because you've got a new set of people every week. Right. So,
how does that affect the county? Are they considered commercial, like for the Whalehead Club, for instance, when we do Wine Wednesday or the Whalehead Wednesday? Excuse me.
I think the county is considered non-commercial, so I think we fall under the non-commercial signage exemption.
All right.
Mr. Woody, I want to make sure I'm with you on this. On a main road, we can have the larger signs. In residential areas, we can't.
No, it's by road frontage. So if you have more than 100 feet of road frontage, you can have the 32 square foot signs. So if you're in a residential area and you happen to have like 10-acre lots, for example, that may have a lot of road frontage, they can still have the larger signs. So we keyed the size of the sign to the road frontage. We did that because didn't think that you would want to go into a traditional subdivision where you have between 60 and 100 foot wide lots and have 2 and 3 32 square foot signs on each of those residential lots.
But we have some residential homes that are on main roads that don't have 100 square feet road frontage.
Yeah. So if you had a 100-foot wide lot on Currituck Highway, then under this ordinance, you would be limited to an 8 square foot size sign. Now, if you wanted to allow right now the larger signage is keyed to the road frontage, but you can key it to a road type as well. So, for example, you could say, or if you're on Currituck Highway or a major highway, you could have the larger sign. So, I mean, there's a way to work through that if that's what the board wants to do.
Okay. So, in other words, if we wanted to go non-residential area, road frontage.
You can key it by zoning too. That's right. So, the important thing is that whatever standard you decide, you can't require the code enforcement officer to have to read the sign to apply it.
All right. And the next thing, back to real estate. I know sometimes these companies over the weekend where they're not out 7 days a week, they're only out Friday, Saturday, Sunday per se, where they're trying to promote their subdivisions, where they put them out with their 8-foot tall flying banners, whatever you want to call them. Those would no longer be allowed, except on road frontage again, as you said?
It would only be allowed if the road frontage permitted the larger sign, and if that particular property owner decided their one non-commercial sign they were going to allow to be used for a real estate sign.
Okay.
But the manner in which they typically put those out would not be allowed, because generally they don't have permission. They put them in the right-of-way, and they put multiple signs on one property.
Right.
But could there be a way under this ordinance, under that Supreme Court decision, to locate off-premise residential signs? There could be.
Thank you.
Mr. Woody, with the special use, they still have to get a permit, correct?
The special event permit, or special event, yeah, they have to get it's a staff, it's called a temporary use permit, and it's issued at the staff level.
So we have some way of knowing if who's not taking their signs down.
Correct. Yeah, there's still some accountability with that permit.
So, Commissioner Hall, are you thinking we should look at limiting the size in, say, a neighborhood, or if it's not on a major thoroughfare, I guess?
I guess what I'm looking at is the fact that if you have a home on Currituck Highway and that's prime real estate, or you're not a residential neighborhood on Puddin Ridge Road, or go down to Snowden Road, or go in any of these others, and it's not considered a residential neighborhood, then to sit there and say, hey, I've got prime road frontage and I can't put but a 4x4, it's going to be a 8 square foot sign, am I that's kind of like saying, wow, my neighbor, because he's got a larger lot on a major road, he can have this 32 square foot sign and I can't because my yard's not big enough. Well, we have residential on the main highways. So I think a non-residential road frontage, I can understand it, but if you're in a residential neighborhood, I can understand this. But if you're on an open highway, an open road, I just think that to limit the size of the sign wouldn't be fair to those folks that have prime real estate on these non-residential roads. Some of our roads are 45 and 55 miles an hour that isn't on 168 or 158. And go down Tulse Creek Road. Some of those signs that advertise some of the property, some of those lots are small and they put a 4x4 sign. Well, that wouldn't work anymore. But if you don't put a 4x4 sign up or bigger on that piece of property, if it's, depending on the size, then your chances of selling it aren't as good.
So, Mr. Woody, you're saying that, and to your point, Mike, on a main highway, someone with a small lot, if they want to put an 8-foot square sign in their front yard,
Larger than.
or larger than 8-foot square, that sign basically could be anything they wanted to, correct?
No, they couldn't put in anything larger than 8 square feet.
No, but I mean, as far as what the verbiage,
Right.
the verbiage on it could be anything they wanted,
Yeah,
correct?
anything non-commercial. So you still couldn't put signs up advertising like the gas station down the road or whatever. But again, these were just non-commercial signs. So if it were, the best example I can think of is like a nonprofit. So let's say the Business Expo again. If I wanted to put a Business Expo sign on my property, as it's written right now, even though I'm on Currituck Highway, if I've got a 100-foot wide property, I can only put up an 8 square foot Business Expo sign.
So if a contractor is doing an upgrade to somebody's house and they want to put this house is being upgraded by such and such, they're allowed to do that.
Correct.
Okay, and if they wanted to do a larger than 8-foot square sign,
It has to be more than 100 feet. Of
but
linear
wait,
road
but you're
frontage.
proposing on a smaller frontage on the main highway, they could put a big sign up. So technically, you could do something like that.
If you
You
had-
could key the size increase to the road type,
Correct.
for
So
example.
if the homeowner decided to leave that sign up there for a year, you couldn't do anything about it then, could you?
If they had an active building permit, no, because you're getting that non-commercial sign. Well, actually, no. You could. I mean, because
They could
everybody
get
gets.
the
You're right,
sign you
everybody,
said-
excuse me. You're right. Everybody gets one non-commercial
Yeah,
sign.
so they could leave that as long as they wanted to.
Correct.
The 32 square foot.
32 square foot.
So sheet of
So you could
plywood.
have contractors out there to negotiate something, just leave it up there for a year for me on the main highway. And
Good
you'd sign.
advertising.
Huh? You
Good
could. You
advertising.
could.
I guess, and I don't know the answer to that, but
Well-
but at what point does it go from non-commercial to commercial? But when is it just a billboard for a contractor versus?
I guess that becomes a question whether it's deemed to be an off-site premise sign,
Yeah.
advertising a commercial entity that's not located on that particular site.
I see.
But that's my point. I was
Right.
of getting into the small billboards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if you have a 5-lot subdivision on the highway and each of them had 150 feet, you could end up with
You could.
eat more
Ben,
chicken.
Under the previous UDO, how big? In other words, what were they allowed to do relative to this prior? Because I don't recall a 4x8 sign in the past.
No, the only signs that were ever jumped up the 4x8 were some of the real estate subdivision signs, so some of the commercial real estate signs. So for the bigger real estate projects tend to be like a sheet of plywood. Campaign political signs tend to be 8x4, and then some of the nonprofit signs for events. Some of those have made those, like the Brewertons make 8x4 signs. So the majority of the contractor real estate signs message are probably 8 square feet. It's just commercial real estate, commercial subdivision, political signs, and some of the nonprofit signs that were bigger. So we're trying to accommodate those bigger signs, but we can't do it by saying what the signs are. So we try
Understood. So the context of the question is that what are we changing? What are we eliminating that people used to be able to do? Because that,
Right.
you know, and before there was not necessarily a limitation to how many they can do. Because my concern is, you know, if you take anything to its extreme, where going back to the small subdivision where there's 5 lots, you know, you get 5 32 square foot signs in a row, you know, that's personally starts getting into the, you know, I don't think that's what the county's looking for
Right.
from from cleaning up
Right.
the alley. So, and then going back to the planning board, it appeared to me that no one appeared that was against the rewrite of the UDO. Is that accurate?
correct.
Okay.
And
You know, we
limit
can,
We can nitpick
as we've
that.
shown, I mean, we can always edit the UDO downrange, but
Yeah. Yeah.
And some of these 8 square foot signs, we don't have time limits on them.
Depends on the manner in which, you know, if
if it's over 100 foot, no, they can put that sign up
Permanently.
permanently.
Right. That's their
long
one
as
sign.
it's, long as
Right,
it's non-commercial.
No, but like I said,
Well, 8 square feet is no big deal. That's a small sign. That's a builder's little.
What does Pedro say?
108 miles to stop.
You know, anecdotally, the reason we keyed the bigger signs to the road frontage is because just anecdotally, when you ride down the highway, about the only place you see the bigger signs, it does tend to be on the bigger property. So I don't have hard data to tell you that every big sign's on a big property, but that's how we logically got to. It would have been a lot easier to say everybody gets one 8 square foot sign and be done, but we didn't think that was it's probably not going to work. So.
I'm sure I can see this down the road getting tweaked.
Yes.
again,
Yes.
Because something's going to come off and it's not going to look
Let us know.
I'm sure Ben thought of everything.
But again, my concern comes in the fact of timing. I don't want, like you said, I don't want a sign up there for the whole year, but how do we take and keep that from happening?
The Constitution right now,
I mean, you can, so, we got some timing, so if your extra sign is because you have a building permit, well, then there's an end date to your building permit. If your extra sign's because of a campaign, there's an end date to the campaign. So we have created timing where we knew we could do it. But if you make the assumption that everybody can have a non-commercial sign, then everybody's going to have one sign. And so you've got to make a decision, are you going to allow that basic allowance or not? I mean, that's probably where the problem is that one sign that everybody gets without a timing.
Right. All right.
Mr. Woody, all these commissioners have confused me. Can you start over?
Mr. Woody, I do have one question just to kind of clarify. Under homeowners associations that have covenants, they wouldn't apply the same, correct? Or would they
any covenants would not be relevant to this, and I don't know.
Would negate this.
Yeah, I mean that's they can.
Okay,
maybe
so
prohibit all
I just
signs.
don't want
Yeah.
some of the developments that have covenants in my district come in and say, well, no, the commissioner said I could do this, but the covenants trump that.
They could be more restrictive to their covenants.
Okay.
They could allow no signs.
Any further questions at this time? With that, I'll open the public hearing. I currently have no one signed up for the public hearing. Did anyone come in late that would like to speak to this issue? And with that, I'll close the public hearing and open the floor for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve PB 1702 with the Currituck County sign ordinance text amendment.
I'll second the motion.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I would like to encourage the board to make the consistency statement that you're required to make when you're adopting a zoning text amendment.
And it's in the planning board recommendation as well
OUP
as the
policy,
staff report.
CA4. Page 26.
Stand by. Okay, here we go.
34.
It doesn't matter. And I move for approval of PB 1702, Currituck County Sign Ordinance Text Amendment, in that the requested text amendment is consistent with the 2006 Land Use Plan because it includes standards to enhance community appearance and create a unique business image by regulating sign quantity, area, height, lighting, and maintenance. Recognizes and protects the community image benefits of the major highway corridors through continuing to incorporate sign number, area, and height restrictions. It continues to prevent the placement of additional billboards. Furthermore, the request is reasonable in the public interest because it implements changes to unconstitutional ordinances, provisions to comply with the Supreme Court ruling in Reed versus Town of Gilbert, Arizona. Proposed changes extend the protection of the First Amendment of the United States. Furthermore,
Good.
yeah, we'll hold off there.
All right.
I'll second that motion.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Moving on to old business, consideration of an ordinance amending Chapter 10, Division 2 of the Currituck County Code of Ordinances by adding Section 10-65 to prohibit operation of motor vehicles on the beach strand and foreshore with air pressure in tires exceeding certain pounds per square inch depending on the weight of a motor vehicle. With that, I'll hand it over to Mr. McCree.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this ordinance was before the board at your last meeting, at which time the board tabled the matter, asked that it be returned with some modification. After some consultation with Commissioner White, who is more experienced of driving on the beach than I, we are proposing for your consideration an ordinance that will provide that on the North Beach, that's from the beach access ramp, on any of the beaches that you can drive upon, depending on which time of year, that You may not drive with tire pressure greater than 20 pounds per square inch for motor vehicles weighing less than 3/4 of a ton. No greater than 30 pounds per square inch for motor vehicles between 3/4 of a ton and 1 ton. And then for motor vehicles weighing more than 1 ton, they would be required to maintain tire pounds per square inch, not greater than that required for safe travel. So that is the proposal before the board tonight.
Thank you, Mr. McCree.
Can I come back just quick 2 questions? I think this is endorsed, if I'm not mistaken. The sheriff's department was looking for this recommendation, were they not? Or have I heard?
This is certainly something that I think the North Beach communities have been interested in.
Yeah, they liked it. I think some of the sheriff's department thought this would be good to keep the traffic flowing, is what I've heard.
Well, certainly the expectation would be that it would perhaps reduce the number of vehicles that are stuck in the sand, and also, particularly for those who drive the beach on a regular basis, reduce the rutting that takes place and allow for a smoother and more efficient drive along the beaches.
Because I think a lot of the community up there was supportive of this, is what I've been hearing. So.
Any further questions?
Not a question, but again, my concern is with signage, that there are enough locations to air up once you come off the beach, that you don't have to go 1 mile, 3 miles down the road with 20 pounds of pressure in your tire. If we could make sure that I think we talked about electronic signs possibly. We talked possibly about getting up with the real estate companies and getting them to advertise in their flyers or whatever they send out to the folks at their areas to air up on, that they don't have to drive too far and on 20 pounds of pressure in their tires that are $150 a piece. I'm all for safety on the beach, but I'm concerned also putting those tires on the hard surface. I guess that's my biggest concern here, is that we make sure that we have enough places that they can air up and possibly free of charge as well.
Well, I spoke with Twitty, and they are by far the largest rental company up there, and they're already have that in place with their 5 or 6 air stations they have, and they air people up and down, and they also pass it along to their staff now, to their customers, excuse me, and they have staff to help people out. In addition to that, well, basically people are airing down anyway. After they get stuck, the tow company lets the air out, so we're not really asking them to do anything that they weren't going to have to do after they got stuck and got a $250 or $450 tow bill. And I think, like I said before, we'll see some private enterprise come into play here with people putting air pumps out just like they do at Hatteras at the various gas stations. So hopefully Winks and Corolla Pizza will step it up with a couple more air pumps. And
that's the closest commercial area.
Yeah. So
The air guy.
the air guy,
Air guy.
Cabana Bob and air guy.
And with that, I'll open the floor for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve, change this ordinance. Do I need to do anything else? You
do not.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Moving on, consideration of an ordinance amending Chapter 10, Article 2, Division 7 of the Currituck County Code of Ordinances by striking Section 10-128 and adding Sections 10-125 through 10-129 to provide for dune and beach preservation. And with that, I'll hand it over to Mr. McCree.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this ordinance was also before the board at your last meeting, at which time it was tabled for a slight modification. This ordinance comes out of your retreat where the board discussed an interest in the county's ordinances to ensure the integrity of the county's dunes and its beaches. There is a smattering of ordinances throughout our code that provide here and there for different aspects of dune protection, but this will create a more expansive regulatory scheme to preserve the integrity of the dunes along Currituck County's beaches. Rather than go back through the entire ordinance again, I just will note that the slight modification that was made is on page, packet page 43 of your agenda package, but it is under exemptions, which is line 15 on that page, down at subparagraph 3 at line 29. which provides that an exemption to driving on the dunes are activities within the developed portion of the dune system. And what was added was and driving on permitted driveways and ramps over the dune system. Commissioner Hall, of course, had raised an issue or question that we make clear that driving across the dune system on permitted ramps and driveways is obviously a permitted activity. The other aspect I think that Commissioner Hall raised at the last meeting is something that I explained to the board I believe should be handled perhaps outside of the ordinance itself is whether the county will end up placing some type of ramp markers, particularly along the North Beach, so persons can more readily and easily identify those places within the dunes that will lead them into a publicly dedicated right-of-way street system as opposed to someone's private driveway. So this is commended to you for your adoption.
Thank you, Mr. McCree.
Mr. McCree, I came up with one thought as I was driving down the beach this morning coming to work. Dune walkovers, where the dunes have grown well beyond the existing walkovers.
Mm-hmm.
Did we cover that at all in here? I mean, we're not asking people at that point to come forward and extend their walkway or forcing them to extend their walkway and incur an expense. Or do we need to put an exclusion in there for that?
Let me look at the exemptions real quick.
Dan, doesn't that fall typically under CAMA? I mean, any kind of a walkway construction.
If they were to reconstruct or improve the walkway, that work would require a camera. But I think what Commissioner White is talking about is if you didn't extend the physical structure, could you continue to walk across the remaining dune to get to the beach?
You had your house there for 20 years. We have a home up, and the dune has grown well past the existing walkway. So people just walk down the dune now, and there's a path leading right up to the catwalk, basically, to take you over to the house. And so I'm just asking if we're going to put that expense on homeowners and come through all of a sudden and go, well, you got to extend, you got to extend, you got to extend, you got to extend, in a well-meaning ordinance to preserve and protect our dunes, but not place an extra burden on the homeowners.
Well, one exemption, of course, is development activities associated with a CAMA permit, which they would have initially have installed their dune. But we do provide a definition of the dune walkover improved, which means a raised walkway constructed for the purpose of providing access to the beach from points landward of the dune system.
Right.
But you're talking, I guess, a situation where the dune has grown.
Right.
So it seems to me that would then fall into dune walkover access unimproved, which means a sand walkway or path used for the purposes of providing pedestrian access to the beach, which is no more than 6 feet in width and located in an area where there's no escarpment present between the dune structure and the beach. Escarpment is also a defined term. So it seems to me that if they have an improved dune walkover and then there has been sand there that has accreted and expanded the dune system, it seems to me that would then come under a dune walkover access unimproved.
Right.
And they still would be allowed to continue to traverse through the dune system to the beach, so long as there is not an escarpment there.
Okay. No, there you go.
And with that, I'll open the floor for a motion.
I will make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously.
If I could, one thing, it's kind of related to that with the signage for this stuff that relates to the new signs. If we make signs saying it's illegal to walk, traverse, whatever on the dunes, how does the new sign ordinance going to affect any of that? Just as a total second thought.
You can create exemptions for governmental or public safety informational signs.
Okay.
So we're going to put it in that category and move on.
All right.
Good idea.
Right. Got it.
Moving on, presentation of the annual budget for fiscal year 2017-2018, and set a date for public hearing and possible action. With that, I'll hand it over to Mr. Scanlon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Per statutes of the state of North Carolina, I am required as the budget officer for the county to prepare an annual budget and present that to the Board of Commissioners, which we are doing tonight, at which time the budget becomes your document and you are to set a public hearing, and with the possibility of adopting it no sooner than 10 days after the date is presented. So we will have this scheduled unless the board objects, at your next meeting for you possibly to consider the approval of the budget. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and move through the county budget. And just did.
All right. There you go. Thank you.
I'm just going to flash the budget at you back and forth.
Do it fast as it comes to the phone.
Okay. There we go. Okay. Unlike our federal counterparts, in the state of North Carolina, county governments are required by law to have a balanced budget, and so I'm presenting to you a balanced budget. It is also one of the most important documents that the Board of Commissioners annually put together. Through the budget, you establish your priorities and your work plan, and establish the fiscal policies for the county. A little bit of a misnomer, it is not a single budget that I'm presenting tonight. It's actually 23 individual budgets that, when put together and assimilated as a document, collectively make up the county budget. So with that, I'm going to start with what everybody generally thinks of when they think about it, is our daily operations. Our operations are included in the general fund. Be happy to report to you that the balanced budget being presented tonight does not request or suggest an increase in the countywide property tax. Looking to keep that at 48 cents. The budget being presented today is a 2.2% decrease over the budget that is currently in place in the current year. One of the major changes in the budget is we did sit down we had a joint meeting with the Board of Education. The Board of Commissioners did agree to modify the funding formula that we've been using for school systems. We have established a 2% floor. If you recall that the amount per pupil that we appropriate to the Board of Education is indexed annually. The average annual rate last year was 1.3%. By making this modification, you established a 2% floor. That gave the Board of Education an additional $68,000, a total increase of a little over $202,000. The budget starts with evaluation of the county. This is showing you over the last probably 20 years the valuation. The two vertical lines you can see is revaluation. You can see what happened back in it was in the early 2000s. You can see the revaluations when the value of the county spiked. We all know the one we went through several years ago when we saw a decrease in property valuation. The total valuation of the county is just a tick over $6 billion. That valuation by region, you can see in this graph. And this is pretty consistent with what it's looked like in the last several graphs. Again, this is a graphic showing you the property tax over the last 10 years, and we're holding it steady at 48 cents. To put the 48 cent in context, here's the 5 lowest and the 5 highest tax rates throughout the state, so you can put a sense of where 48 falls. The statewide average across all 100 counties is 66.4 cents. Currituck County at 48 cents, we're the 11th lowest tax rate in the state of North Carolina for counties. This is a graph comparing our rate to the state over the last 20 plus years, and you can see we've significantly margin between our rates and what the statewide average is. This is a graph I just showed last year. I think just found it interesting. This is for the last 50 years. This is the tax rates we've had. You can see for a long period of time it moved up and down. The highest was in 1971 and 1972. We actually had a tax rate of $1.75. And then you can see over the last probably 15, 20 years, we've been able to drop the rate, and we've held it pretty steady at the 48 cent rate. At 48 cents, the largest revenue that supports the general fund is property taxes. This is showing you how much we collect over a period of time in property tax. In the budget being presented, we're going to collect about $28.7 million in property taxes. This graph shows you a comparison over the past several years of our actual audited year-end actual expenditures compared to what the budget is, as well as showing you the budget over a period of time. The budget I'm presenting you tonight for general operations is a $50 million budget. It's $50,447,000. That is a 2.2% decrease over the current budget. This is a graph that shows you where or how we anticipate collecting $50 million to operate. You can see by far the property tax is the biggest revenue. Between property tax and other taxes, which is predominantly sales tax, you can see taxes makes up about 2/3 of the revenues that operates the county government comes out of taxes. Here's how we compute those taxes. Again, you have a $6 billion valuation, 48 cents. We only can budget that percentage of tax collection that we have historically collected. And so based on last year's audit, we had a 98.84% collection rate. So that's how we generate the $28 million of tax collection. Here's your 6 highest revenue sources. These 6 sources represent 90% of the $50 million collection is represented by these 5 or 6 property taxes being largest, sales tax, occupancy tax, that is the portion of occupancy tax that supports services in Corolla, some fund balance appropriation. We do receive money back from the federal government and the state government for providing social services, and we do have a fee for ambulatory services, and that collects a little under $1 million. Operationally, this is how the $50 million breaks down. Public safety, as you can see, is by far the largest thing we do. Public safety, and if you looked at public safety and education together, that's 2/3 of the $50 million is in just those 2 service levels alone. We are predominantly a service providing industry, so no surprise that the majority of the $50 million is in the cost of our people. About almost half of the budget is in personnel cost. Of the $50 million, these 6 departments here are showing you where the most of the money goes. 2/3 of the budget is spent on these 6 services. Public schools, which is a primary responsibility of county governments, is where the majority goes. We're appropriating just a little under $11 million for public education. The 6 departments receiving the largest increase in this budget compared to last budget is on this screen. We talked about we increased the funding formula and put a 2% cap or floor, on public education. That generates a $202,000 increase to the school system next year. The sheriff's office increase is predominantly in capital outlay, vehicle replacement. EMS is in ambulance replacements. Inspections, we have moved a person into that department from another department, so it shows up as in addition to that. Elections is talking about replacing our voting equipment. And cooperative extension was a capital outlay purchase. So it was capital outlay that was really driving these figures. This is a graph that shows county employment. Again, 47, almost half of the budget is in our people. It shows a disbursement of those folks over the last 5 years, the red bar being public safety. You can see where the vast majority of our folks are. We have 396 full-time equivalent employees working for the county. In the budget, this is how they break down. Again, you can see half of the folks that are hired or employed by the county will work in public safety. I am proposing to employ 6 additional folks in this proposed budget. 4 of them are in EMS. The EMS, the level of service and the size of department has gotten to where, with the amount at any given time, the amount of employees that are out on either vacation, sick, Family Medical Leave Act, or for whatever reason requires them to miss work, we end up having to provide that slot at overtime. So although I'm suggesting that we employ 4 additional EMS folks to cover each of the shifts, there is an equal and greater decrease in the amount of overtime that we are paying. So although we're hiring folks, the budget actually has a decrease because you're hiring folks back at time and a half, and these folks are the 4 folks are going in at straight time. So although those folks are coming again, if you went and looked at the EMS budget, you'll see it's actually a comparable decrease in their overtime budget. There's a person in the sheriff's department. We are working with the sheriff between this year's budget and next year's budget to bring on 4 additional patrolling officers. There's one in the current budget, there's one in the proposed budget, and in the 2-year budget, the second 2 are in the second budget. So over a 2-year period of time, she'll be able to deploy 4 more patrolling officers. And we have one person in the tourism department we discussed is to start taking better advantage of video capabilities to bring somebody in who can not only do promotional videos but public service announcements. You passed a couple of ordinances tonight that we could do videos on to help explain those, to put those out, but to bring video technology into county services. Here's how we determine how we fund the school system. This is the money that goes directly into instructional. We give them additional $1 million for capital to maintain their buildings, and that's where the $10 million comes from, almost $11 million. But they'll receive $9.9 million for instructional money. It is based on the projected number of students. You can see there's a 3-student projection increase next year. Those projections have come from the Department of Public Instruction. So at 4,009 students, at $2,489 per student is how we calculated their appropriation. Move on to as we keep building the budget, we go from the general fund, which is again the county services. We add these additional funds into it to get our operating budget. The proposed total operating budget is $72 million. That is a 2.9% decrease next year in the proposed budget than what we're currently operating under. The major things in the operating budget is we continuing our effort we are required to have a backup 911 center, so if something happens to go out with our primary, we still have the ability to take and dispatch 911 calls. That project is underway. We will complete it next year. We are combining. We now have several small wastewater systems on the mainland. We're combining them into a single enterprise fund as a single wastewater system. I am proposing for the folks that live in the Whalehead subdivision, they have a district tax that only the folks in the Whalehead subdivision pay. I'm proposing to decrease that from 2.5 cents to 2 cents. That 0.5 cent was in there to help create a capital reserve. They have that reserve now, and so we're moving that tax down. For folks that live in Ocean Sands, and only the folks that live in Ocean Sands, the Ocean Sands Water and Sewer Advisory Board has requested it and asked the Board of Commissioners to raise their service district tax. It is reflected in this budget. It's a 5 cent tax increase. That 5 cent goes to replacing the phase 2 and 3 of the wastewater treatment plant. And again, that is only a tax increase for the folks that are in Ocean Sands. For the folks that live in Ocean Sands and Crown Point, this is another tax increase that is recommended to you from the advisory board of the Ocean Sands Crown Point watershed. This is for stormwater. They're asking to have a 1 cent tax assessed in those 2 communities to create emergency reserve so that if we have flooding issues, they have money available to rent pumps and to start looking at addressing flooding while they're waiting and moving forward an engineered long-term solution. A tax increase recommended by an advisory board that is not in the budget is the Moyock Watershed District did ask, and the advisory board did make a recommendation that we increase the tax rate from 1.5 cents to 5 cents. They were presented a list of projects to start addressing flooding in the Moyock area within just the Moyock District, which is predominantly Quail Run and the village. This is not in this budget. As we discussed during the budget work session, we're electing at this stage to wait until the completion of the Army Corps study in that area to determine the best course of action to move forward. And again, this graphically just shows you in time where we are with our operating budget. To get to the county total budget, we add in our capital projects. Brings the total county budget next year is just over $72 million. That's a 2.9% decrease next year than what we have now. So across the board, we're presenting a budget that is less than what we have been spending this year. Our major capital projects, the top three are actually in some level of moving forward already. They're either in some kind of design or civil work. We're continuing to work with the school system on the development of a school bus garage replacement. We're working on a public safety center, and we continue to work with the Moyock community to create or establish the Moyock Community Park. The last project up there is a new initiative that we have discussed it several times during your retreat and during the budget work session, as we are working with consultants to improve countywide broadband initiative throughout the county, so that not only for county services, but potentially for homeowner uses, we could bring in a more reliable, higher rate broadband service. And here's graphically, it's just showing you the $72.2 million county budget. Wanted to show this the last piece of the budget is our debt management program. It's kind of a small print, but we have no debt in Currituck County that is supported by property tax. We do have some debt. That is the extent of the debt that we have. It is predominantly in our utility systems, and so therefore the debt service is paid for by just those people that use that utility. And again, I'd like to repeat that we have no debt in the county that is provided for or supported by general county property taxes. I'm presenting the budget tonight. The board will need to go ahead and establish that a public hearing for your next meeting, which is June 5th, at which time you may or may not elect to adopt the budget, but you are required to have the budget adopted by July 1st of 2017. And Mr. Chairman, with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that the board may have. The entire budget, including all the departments, the line items, is now on the county website. The general public can go and inspect it. I am required to have a physical copy for both the public and the press. That's what one copy looks like. That will be in my office. But again, the general public, it is already on our website, and the general public can go to the website, and it has the details all the way down to how much a department pays in the telephone. And me and the finance office would be happy to answer any questions that the community might have after they have a chance to review it. But with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions the board might have.
Mr. Manager, I know we've had this discussion, but I'd love the public to know it. On debt service, the COA building that's paid for by sales tax, that'll be paid off in how long?
We have, it is paid off, I believe, in a year and a half.
And at that time, then, we would have no existing, other than the 4 new things we will be adding, everything we have that will be paid off for sales tax. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is correct. The public safety building right now is being projected to be funded at a transfer tax. So when the COA final payment is made, which is I think we have 3 payments left, there's some annual payments. When that is done, we'll have no sales tax or property tax supported debt at all. It'll be just the utility debt at that stage.
Mr. Chairman, is it legal now to have a work session before we have the public hearing? I know there'd been some discussion amongst.
It is. What we're doing tonight is again, as the budget officer, I'm charged with preparing a balanced budget. I presented that to you. You now have whatever time you need to take to amend, to modify, to meet, to discuss in any fashion anytime you want. So you certainly can have work sessions or is whatever you feel like you need between now and July 1st to review what I've presented, to feel comfortable with what I presented, and to modify it and change it as you see fit.
So it won't affect the public hearing? Or we should have it before the public hearing? Or it doesn't matter?
You would need to have your deliberations before the public hearing so the public understands what is being presented as potentially to be adopted.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? With that, I'll open the floor for a motion and
that would be to set the public hearing for June 5th.
Public hearing date and accept the budget.
I'll make them. I'm sorry. No, I was going to say I'll go ahead and make a motion to go ahead and move forward and set the public hearing date for, would you say June 1st? 5th. June 5th. Excuse me, June 5th.
And I'll second that motion.
Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to have a work session before the public hearing.
Okay, noted. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. If I can, to the board, thanks for spending all the extra time that we've spent getting this budget right, taking an entire day out of your busy schedules, especially this time of year. Shows your dedication to, being good stewards of our tax money, and I appreciate that. Mr. Scanlon and your staff, great job. I can tell you all put a lot of time and thought and sleepless nights into it, and I know it was a big deal this year, and on behalf of us and the citizens, I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on, consideration and action of an ordinance of the Currituck County Board of Commissioners amending Section 10-63 of Chapter 10 of the Currituck County Code of Ordinances to allow certain activities involving motor vehicles on the beach strand and making a technical correction. And with that, I open the floor to Mr. McCree.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. As the board requested, there is now drafted and proposed before you an ordinance that modifies the current, what we know as the beach driving ordinance, to expand on the authority of persons to drive upon the beach during, in particular, the May to September time of year, greater than what has been previously allowed. A little bit of background. This ordinance was originally adopted in 1989 with amendments that occurred in 1992 and then 1998. And then more recently in 2014, when the Board of Commissioners at the time had received some interest from particularly planned unit developments on the Outer Banks with wanting to provide what they called an enhanced level of service to their property owners by using motor vehicles on the beach to place recreational equipment, tents, umbrellas on the beach, as well as to collect solid waste within their beachfront areas. And there's also at the same time an interest from the commercial business community in allowing for them to also drive upon the beach during this time of year, which traditionally, under the ordinance, had not been allowed in the past. In fact, the commercial restriction on driving on the beach was adopted in 1998. So since from 1998 to 2014, you definitely could not drive upon the beach for commercial purposes. And from May 1 to September 30, which is still in the ordinance, you could not drive on the county's beaches from that area, the Dare County line north to the North Beach ramp. This ordinance is presented to you under authority that's provided by the Board of Commissioners as general police power to adopt ordinances affecting the general health, safety, and welfare. And another important aspect and authority that the county has that some may not recognize or know is that the General Assembly in 1985 adopted a session law, which is a local act adopted by the General Assembly authorizing a county or a city or town to have additional regulatory authority over a certain subject matter than is provided for in the general statutes itself. But in 1985 allowed for Currituck County to have the authority to, by ordinance, regulate, restrict, and prohibit the use of dune or beach buggies, jeeps, motorcycles, cars, trucks, or any other form of power-driven vehicle specified by the county's governing board on the foreshore, beach strand, and barrier dune system. So you derive your authority to regulate the use of power-driven vehicles on the county's beaches, not only from the general statutes itself, but from the General Assembly in 1985 giving you additional regulatory authority and power. Now, what is proposed tonight is a modification of what we have had within our Code of Ordinances since 2014. Since 2014, we have allowed for the delivery, placement, and pickup of recreational equipment, tents, umbrellas, and the like, as well as the collection of solid waste between the hours of 6 a.m. and 7:30 a.m., and then 5:30 p.m. and 7 p.m. by commercial entities with a base of operation within the county and by management of planned unit developments. And the board at that time decided on this window of hours in order to reduce the impact of motor vehicles on the beach with the recreating public on the beach, and recognizing the amount of crowds that do use our beaches to their enjoyment. And so that has sort of worked the last couple of years, although we've been receiving reports from some concerned citizens in the Sheriff's Department that there seems to be incidences where some entities are taking advantage of this language or going beyond what is allowed and has been allowed by this language by not only driving onto the beach during these hours across the dune line, but then throughout the day traversing north and south on the county's beaches, providing various services to customers, patrons, tourists, renters within their various communities. And that has never been allowed under the county's ordinances. But trying to recognize again that these types of services have been desired by persons recreating here, and plan unit developments to some extent have been expressing an interest and desire to provide for greater service within their PUDs. What is proposed tonight would, first of all, allow for the continued delivery and placement of equipment on the county's beaches between the hours of 6 a.m. and 7:30 a.m. and 5:30 p.m. and 7 p.m., which would be for the collection of that equipment, we would think, because we don't allow overnight placement of items on the beach, by commercial entities that have a base of operation within the county, but we'll add two additional requirements for that privilege. One, which is will require a permit for each commercial entity vehicle that is accessing the beach during those times, in a manner provided for by Section 10-64 of this code. Well, that is the process that we utilize for permitting ATVs, but we would modify if this ordinance is adopted, the ATV permit application, and provide for with the evidence of proper liability insurance and identification of the motor vehicle, a permit that would have to be posted prominently on the commercial vehicle that is accessing the beach during that window of opportunity. And secondly, there would no longer be allowed, because we received a number of complaints the last summer in particular, what some are calling prospecting of customers and locations on the beach by some companies or others going out onto the county's beaches and stringing for many feet in each direction umbrellas, chairs, and other recreational equipment, and then waiting for someone to come and rent those items there on the beach. So this would now provide that the commercial entities that are delivering, placing, and picking up recreational equipment, umbrellas, and chairs for customers renting such equipment prior to its delivery. So there would have to be a prior arrangement having been made between a customer and a commercial entity. The commercial entity then, during the hours of opportunity, would go onto the beach to place the equipment in the morning, and then to retrieve it, you would expect, in the evening. And then with regard to management of planned unit development communities adjacent to the Atlantic Ocean, would add an additional requirement or additional provision, or with ownership of the beach foreshore and beach strand. And that was, frankly, to recognize the unique circumstance of the Currituck Club that does own an area on the beach strand or foreshore, unique to, well, I won't say unique because other PUDs do own their beach strands too by deed, but this is to recognize that Currituck Club has a little different situation, and they don't have direct access to their own beach area except via the county's property there at the southern Currituck Beach access. And then the Currituck Club and other planned unit development communities could access their property again during or the beachfront adjacent to their PUD during those hours, the window of opportunity hours, but they would have to have a permit for each vehicle that will be going across the dune line during those hours. And they would apply for that permit in the same way that the commercial entities would apply for their permits. Now, what was being also added by this language in the ordinance proposed would be that the management of planned unit development communities would be allowed to, once they take their motor vehicles out onto the beach and the areas that are defined later on in the proposed ordinance, they would be allowed to keep that motor vehicle or motor vehicles within the defined boundary areas set out in the ordinance all day long between the hours of 7:30 a.m. and 7 o'clock p.m. In order to be able to provide for services to persons that are recreating on the beach within those defined boundary areas. But that would not allow, and we've never allowed, for all day long going east and west across the dune lines, ferrying food or other equipment, or running north and south outside of the defined boundary area that would be provided by this ordinance. So with that kind of as the basis then of this amendment, the rest of the amendment moves into describing those boundary areas in which motor vehicles may be utilized by management of planned unit development communities between the hours of 7:30 a.m. and 7 o'clock p.m. Rather than reading each one, what it amounts to is that there's a boundary area defined for the beach front adjacent to Pine Island planned unit development. There's an area described for the Currituck Club's area that they own on the beach front or foreshore. There's an area described for Buck Island, which is a planned unit development. There's an area described for Corolla Light planned unit development. And lastly, there's an area described for villages at Ocean Hill, an area in which that they could provide for the same type of service as everybody else. And so we think we've covered all the planned unit developments with the ability and provision for them to, in the same manner as they really would have, or actually going beyond what they had been allowed to do in the past. But making sure that we're not going to have a constant flow of traffic across access areas all day long. You get your vehicle out into your defined PUD area during that morning window of opportunity, and you may leave the vehicle there to service the area that's defined in the ordinance. So those are the modifications that would be proposed over what has been in the ordinance the last 2 years and what has been or should have been the enforced practice within the last 2 years. And then I think that the technical correction was there was a provision in the ordinance from a couple of years ago that allowed for the use of motor vehicles on the beach at Corolla Village Road beach access for surf competition that was set forth in a certain time of year. That provision actually had a sunset clause on it. It still appears in the ordinance, but this ordinance would strike that language from the Code of Ordinances, unless the board wants to enact that again in the future. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Mr. McCree, so from what I've heard then, the vehicle's only been allowed on it for 2 years.
14, right?
Yeah,
That's correct.
For 2 years, okay, and we're not really changing the existing ordinance. We're just enhancing it a little bit then, and then defining where the vehicles can drive back and forth in one spot to take care of their individuals. Correct?
That's correct.
And well, I mean.
Now, let me also add with regard to the Currituck Club. You heard a little bit about it tonight. The county in 2015 entered into a service agreement with the Currituck Club to provide, it says within the agreement, to utilize this beach valet services, which is not a defined term, but to provide beach access transportation for disabled persons residing in or visiting the Currituck Club planned unit development or the county's Southern Beach Access. So the idea there and the intention and what's supposed to have occurred since this was entered into is that the Currituck Club would take persons who are disabled onto the beach and would be allowed under this contract to drive across the dune line even within the hours of 7:30 a.m. and 7 o'clock p.m. in order to get these persons to the Currituck Club's area of the beach. So that will not change, and there is an exception within the beach driving ordinance that allows for county contractors to drive on the beach. And so that is under that authority and under that exemption within the beach driving ordinance that this service has been allowed and it was expected to be provided.
So what are we taking away?
You're not taking
Nothing,
away
right?
anything. There still will continue the
Okay.
opportunity for persons who are disabled to be taken to the beach by the Currituck Club's services and vehicles. And it defines within this agreement that is that area of the beach that the Currituck Club owns. They would still be able to do that under this ordinance provision. There's no change or modification to that. What would be allowed for the Currituck Club and the other PUDs, which has not been allowed up to this time, is to leave a vehicle on the beach between the hours of 7:30 a.m. and 7 o'clock p.m. in the defined area, and to move north and south within the defined area to provide services within that defined area. But so that is actually an expansion of that which has been allowed by ordinance over the last 2 years.
Ike, if I can, so the Currituck Club is asserting that we're not going to let them go back and forth, and their beach valet service, as I understand it, is for them to move people from their drop-off point down to their beach using the county's access. Is that correct? Or maybe you're better.
That is correct. Well,
Okay.
the agreement that was just read
Right.
was in exchange for the Currituck Club's ability and right to use county property to run a valet service from where the trolley drops off to the dune. So they could provide that service. They also agreed, because that service is provided for folks who stay within the Currituck Club subdivision. So it's for their residents and their guests. In exchange for that, for the ability to use county property, they agreed to take any handicapped individual that would present themselves at the Southern Access. They could take the handicapped individuals actually to the beach and deliver to the beach. In the agreement, under the valet part of it, they never had the right to travel up and down the beach. They had the right to go from the trolley to the dune line. So this ordinance amendment actually allows or provides them a mechanism to legally do what they have been doing the last couple of years. A portion of what they were doing was not consistent with the ordinances. So this actually allows them the opportunity to permit and to continue what they have been doing.
And so that will, but we've tightened it up in the respects that they're only allowed to operate within their own property, right? So when they come out the ramp, they can come onto their 150 feet of linear footage, whatever it is.
That's
And
correct.
part of the problem I think we've been hearing about is that they've been traveling south or northbound well beyond their beach property into Pine Island or Spindrift. Is that correct?
Well, I don't know if the Currituck Valet service was moving outside of their area. There was contractors doing that, which was
Right.
part of the original complaint that generated.
Okay.
What we observed was the valet service was going from the trolley drop-off to the toe of the dune and continuing on the beach and then moving north into the area they owned.
Okay.
It's that last piece that was actually prohibited by ordinance and not allowed by the agreement. This ordinance change now provides a mechanism for them to be able to provide that service under a permit. If they so wish to, they can do it. The moving up and down the beach, those communities that have expressed an interest in wanting to do that, or I think it was the 5 that were mentioned specifically, have the ability now to come in and permit. If they want that level of service, they can come in and permit it. But that part of the service is only allowed within the confines of the beach of that subdivision. The general contractors and the property renters, they still perform exactly as they did last year. This doesn't affect them, other than the fact that they will need to come in and get a permit.
Okay. And we did not set a cap on permits this year. We basically need to know who's doing what.
There is no cap, and by tagging this to the ATV process, there's also no fee. But there is an application. It's a half a page application. They need to show ownership of the vehicle and the fact that they have insurance. I think is what's required.
And it wouldn't just be limited to an ATV. I mean, it could be a motor vehicle if they so chose. But because there's some belief that maybe a motor vehicle might be
certainly be quieter,
quieter than an ATV or some type of similar vehicle.
And one other point that was brought up was money changing hands out there. Obviously, there's a long-standing rule about that, except for maybe tow trucks. So, how does that affect the PUD? So we're letting them, say, Corolla Light, to pick on them. They have their stuff out there. Their contractors that they have to place their stuff out there. Are we going to get into a gray area with that, or
let's step back and not necessarily. What's in front of you tonight is allowing, through a permit system, a vehicle to travel on the beach. The ability for anybody to do commercial activity on the beach is in the UDO already, and it is prohibited. So no money for services should change hands anywhere on the beach for any type of services. It is outright prohibited. What we have been allowing is you can make arrangements and rent whatever, a chair, an umbrella, through a county-based business, and it can be delivered to the beach, but for no services should money be changing hands anywhere on our beaches for anything other than, as you mentioned, for the towing operation allowance on the northern beaches.
So what you're saying then is, if I'm a PUD and my family goes down on the beach and says, we forgot to get umbrellas, and I walk up to my PUD and say, hey, I need an umbrella. I can't sign like you sign room 329. I can't sign for it because that's exchanging money. Is that correct? I'm not trying to split hairs, but I'm trying to make sure
You could not offer them money on the beach. If it was a PUD who did come in and got the permit because they are a PUD that elected to have the service, have a vehicle on the beach providing the service, the person could not go up to that truck and pay the driver and exchange cash for that umbrella. Arrangements would have to be made elsewhere, which is how it has been operating to now, is arrangements are made in some other fashion.
As the manager said to you, which before you is just the ability and authority to drive onto the beach for a specific purpose during specific hours in a specific area. The UDO will cover issues related to commercial transactions occurring on the beach or commercial use of the beach.
So the commercial vendor we have here tonight, it should not harm him?
Well, I can't speak to whether it harms him. He can continue to do the same service that he did last year.
Right.
He does have to come in and get a permit. He has the ability to approach these 5 subdivisions also and provide his service and operate that service under the guise of one of these subdivisions, and then therefore he could have his truck out there outside of these prescribed hours.
He could move north-south.
Within the PUD.
If one of those PUDs contract with him and he comes in, or the business, and they get the license for that PUD, one of those 5, then he can go on, or the business can go on the beach and operate within that PUD's boundaries basically all day long. Outside of that, individually, they can continue to do the service they did last year. If they do a rental the night before in the morning between 6 and 7:30, they can go out on the beach, they can drive out the beach, they can set the stuff up for all the folks the night before that rented, and they can come back off the beach and they can have their stuff out there. They're not limited to what part of the beach they can travel on under that part of the ordinance. So they can service anywhere as long as the commercial part of it occurred prior to them actually going on to the beach.
But if they were to contract with the management of a planned unit development, they of course would need to be careful about how that arrangement and with regard to how they will be paid for the rental of equipment occurs, so it does not run afoul of the UDO's prohibition on commercial activity or commercial use of the beach.
So unless they're rented ahead of time, in other words, I come down there again to the beach and I see 12 sets of umbrellas out there, they're already all rented ahead of time because I know last year, one of the complaints I had was they weren't rented ahead of time, and all the great spots were taken.
Right.
And this will eliminate that problem.
That's part of the purpose of this ordinance, is to eliminate that.
Yes.
If I can, I'm not sure who this question's for. Somebody out there. If we allow this to happen, does Pine Island have the ability to, in their PUD, to say no motor vehicles are allowed on our beach, therefore restricting whoever does a commercial enterprise through the Currituck Club, restricting him from going on their property?
Well, I guess the ordinance is drafted in such a way that it does not define a boundary area within which a motor vehicle may be operated attached directly to a specific plan unit development management entity or property owners association. So conceivably, I don't know if it would be practical or not, but conceivably, one PUD, management of a PUD could leapfrog up the beach and place their vehicle within the boundary area of another PUD, as defined in the ordinance. But, I mean, perhaps that could occur.
But I mean, to your question, the way this is written, any subdivision between 6 and 7:30 cannot prohibit. I mean, you're giving the right to a business to go out to the beach between 6 and 7:30 and conduct their portion of the business. They have the right to go from the Dare County line up. So, and I think your question was, would a subdivision, or in my example, Pine Island, be able to prohibit that? They cannot. What they have the ability to control is whether somebody is out there after 7:30 moving up and down. That part they have control over, but they can't stop the vendor coming out between 6 and 7:30. So if someone was staying at Pine Island and rented an umbrella the night before, the contractor can go down to Pine Island's beach and set that umbrella up for that guest and come back off the beach, as long as they're off the beach by 7:30.
Although we understand that there may be is more than one management entity of a plan unit development within the area that we normally associate as Pine Island. So in that instance, one of these other management of a plan unit development would be able, under the ordinance as proposed, to place their vehicle out onto the beach and move north and south within the defined boundary area of Pine Island, as is broadly defined.
Okay, there might be 4 to 5 POAs in Pine Island.
All right, let me re-ask the question. So with this ordinance, if Pine Island doesn't want anyone driving up and down their beach from 7 o'clock in the morning until 5 in the afternoon, they can put that in their PUD, and you wouldn't be able to drive up and down the beach.
What's in the ordinance?
Right.
And so that they would not be able to do that. They don't have to do anything to affect that. Your ordinance requires that.
Okay.
Now, with an asterisk, that I don't want anybody from Pine Island listen. We tend to think of Pine Island from the county line all the way up to the Southern Beach access, but
right.
what we've learned is, although that area is Pine Island, there are multiple property owners associations within that area. So one of them could say, we want someone to get the permit to drive. So I don't want to give the impression that Pine Island collectively, because one of those 5 might come in and say, yeah, we want to do this. And so someone could, within that POA's beach, can operate.
Now, with this change, how do we enforce this?
We'll have two mechanisms. We'll have through our zoning officer and through law enforcement.
And if someone is outside of the boundaries, do we fine them? Do we put a low jack on their four-wheeler?
No,
I mean, how do we
receive a civil citation?
Well, the sheriff's department can write a civil citation on the spot. Zoning is a little bit more protracted process, but the code enforcement officer could make a determination as a violation of the zoning ordinance and could go through the notice of violation and that process under the UDO. Because
probably to get down to the skinny of all this is we have rules, but they're not being enforced, and that's why we're here. So that's my concern. Will they be enforced? And as you say, you can't enforce them. So I guess some of my questions answered.
But we want to be sure that all are enforced in an equitable and equal manner. And we think this ordinance modification will provide the basis for law enforcement to be able to do that.
And does it affect the Currituck Club in any way to continue to provide the services they're providing? Does it inhibit them from being able to provide the services they provide?
If the Currituck Club wants to continue to do what they have been doing, they will need to come forward and get a permit for the vehicle in which they're doing that service.
And that's it.
That's the only difference.
Well, except for if there has been the regular practice of going across the dune line all day long and then proceeding north or south, I mean, that would not be, well, that's never been allowed.
Except with handicapped people.
Except for disabled
Understand.
persons, which is an exemption or exception already under the ordinance.
So we're tightening everybody up, basically.
So I think that was the intent or purpose.
Is a southern beach access the terminus at the beach onto Currituck Club's property or Pine Island property, or what's when you come out on the beach, when you go through that access?
North.
Their property is just north of it, or it's adjacent property line, I guess. So
I
you come
don't
out
know
onto-
right offhand how much, or if there is a gap between that area of the beach owned by Currituck Club and the county's access ramp.
Okay, so the last question. Do they have the ability to turn around? So they've been using this access, and they're supposed to stop at the beachhead, basically. We have enough room for them to turn around there? I haven't been out that ramp in God knows how long.
There is room.
Okay.
Any further questions?
I guess you've answered my question, and that is the enforcement. That is that I don't want somebody to say, well, I picked up the phone and there was nobody to call because it was Tuesday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon or Saturday at 4 o'clock. Sheriffs can enforce this as well as our folks. It's just different styles.
Well, it's a different ordinance provisions and mechanisms, but certainly law enforcement will be fully capable and able and authorized to enforce this ordinance.
I just don't want to put the burden. If we have people available, of course, we can send ours. I just don't always. It's terrible when everything falls on law enforcement and say, they can do it. It's kind of like a catch-all.
Well,
I mean, let's have
law enforcement was part of the requesting process to get here. They wanted to make sure that we had clear rules and regulations that could be equitably applied across the whole beach strand. And once that's in place, then they can certainly enforce it. And because we had different PUDs doing different things, it made it very challenging for them to be able to go out there and enforce it. So this puts a consistent rule across all of the PUDs, which is what the Sheriff's Department was actually looking for, so that they can adequately and equitably enforce the ordinance.
Right.
And with that, I'll open the floor for a motion. No, there's not a public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we approve this change.
I'll second it.
Mr. McCree, do they need to state the reasons why?
No, this again is an ordinance adopted under general police power.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Moving on to board appointments. I would like to recommend Bill Batty for the Board of Adjustment. He recently opened a surveying business in Moyock. Before that, he was a surveyor here in the county for quite some time.
Second.
Can we do all of them together for the
Yeah,
Board
we'll
of
do all of them
Adjustments?
together. Yeah. Mr. Beaumont, did you have a recommendation?
I'd like to nominate Greg Hammer to fill my vacant spot or vacating spot on the Board of Adjustment. Mr. Hammer works for the USDA with the U.S. government. Consequently, he's well aware of working with and around government regulations, and I believe would be a welcome asset to the Board of Adjustments.
And I would like to appoint Joe Kovacs for the vacancy that is being brought forward for my seat. He was a previous planning board member and very active in the community and is excited to serve on the Board of Adjustments.
Mr. Hall?
I have one for the board, Economic Board, if I could. That would be Juanita Kraus. She's a businesswoman in the county of Currituck. She was in the construction industry for years, and I believe she would do well with our economic development. She would be replacing Barbara Courtney, who could not be reappointed due to her lengthy service and appreciated service to the county.
Any more nominations? I would look for a motion.
Motion for approval?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Moving on to the consent agenda.
I move for approval of the consent agenda.
I'll second that motion.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Moving on to Commissioner's report. Mr. Hall?
None at this time, sir.
Mr. White?
Nothing from me this evening, thank you.
Ms. Gilbert?
I'm going to pass and let Mr. Payment talk about the one activity, then let summer begin.
Mr. Beaumont?
I had the opportunity to attend a major exercise that was conducted in Currituck County on Thursday of this past week. It was an exercise to demonstrate and/or perform a combined, coordinated search and rescue for a maritime event that took place out of the Water Lily boat ramp facility. I first of all want to express my gratitude to some of the entities that attended, and that list included, and I'll say ahead of time, please forgive me if I forget you, but the U.S. Coast Guard sent a boat. North Carolina Wildlife attended. The Currituck County Sheriff's Department was there. Knott's Island sent their boat. Corolla Ocean Rescue was there. The City of Chesapeake sent a boat, and the City of Virginia Beach sent a boat. Currituck Emergency Management was there as well. This has been an ongoing process of engaging the other entities, and the purpose of the exercise was to help us as Currituck County understand what is available to us in resources if in the event we have a maritime incident. So, for example, we've had everything from boats that have caught fire to individuals that sadly made the decision to end their lives. These are the entities that would come in and would help support the county. It tentatively is going to occur annually now, every May, that this exercise will continue. And I don't know how they pulled it off in the special effects department, but just like I would expect it to happen in real life, it started raining throughout just basically the majority of the exercise. So, an element of reality and an element of realism there. So my hat's off to Currituck County Emergency Management. Mary Beth Nunes did an awesome job helping with the coordination of this, and we look forward to future events and the enhancement of that capability, because we all know water is an attractive aspect of Currituck County, and it's the items going forward, we expect to see more of it. One thing as a public service announcement that I would throw out there that NC Wildlife as well as the U.S. Coast Guard brought up is that there was a major change in federal regulations relating to accidents that occur on the water where alcohol is involved at all. So if there's alcohol or evidence of alcohol in the boat, it will be treated as a felony scene and prosecuted and investigated as such. So I like to have fun on the water just like everyone else, but safety is number one, and in fact, this will be enforced with far greater prosecutorial, that was a David Griggs word, intent, far greater than DUIs on land. And the governor and his staff has basically said the hammer is going to be occurring for the foreseeable future in North Carolina to make our water safe. So that concludes my public service announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Beaumont. Ms. Etheridge.
Mr. Chairman, I serve on the Social Service Advisory Board, and at our last meeting, we interviewed candidates for the director's position when Ms. Rom retires, and I'm pleased to announce that the board offered the position to Ms. Samantha Hurd, and she happily accepted the position. We look forward to working with Mrs. Hurd as she leads our Department of Social Services starting July the 1st.
Thank you, Ms. Etheridge. Mr. Payment.
Well, since Commissioner Gilbert asked me to talk about Currituck Kids event, as everyone knows, Currituck Kids, a nonprofit charity in the county for helping the kids in Currituck. They're having their annual Let Summer Begin extravaganza at the Currituck Barbecues location on June 3rd, which is a Saturday starting at 2 o'clock. A lot of events. Bring your kids out there. It'll be fun. It's a free event for the kids out there. They will have all-you-can-eat food, seafood, chicken, I think, barbecue. Well, there's a cost for that, yeah, but everything else is free for the kids to enjoy. So just come on out and support the community and let your kids have a good time and have some good food. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
So are you taking over the social calendar?
No, I'll be running the bounce house out there for the kids. Thank you.
Okay, fair enough. I have nothing at this time. County manager's report?
Nothing I think.
Okay, with that, I will recess the Board of Commissioner meeting and enter into a special meeting of the Tourism Development Authority with the presentation of the Tourism Development Authority budget for fiscal year 2017-2018 and set a date for public hearing and possible action. And with that, I'll hand it over to Mr. Scanlon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You are now sitting as the TDA. The TDA has a responsibility for overseeing how we handle and expend occupancy tax. So I'll be presenting that portion of our budget. As you already well know, the occupancy tax actually is three different taxes, and each one of those individual taxes has a statutory restriction on how those monies are to be used. Those are the formulas that's in the statutes. Here they are in application. We are projecting next year an occupancy tax to collect $10.5 million. You see the statutory breakdown on the screen. 3.5 has to go to promoting tourism, and the balance, the 7.5, can go to tourism-related expenditures. Under promoting tourism, this is a statutorily defined definition. That is the statute there. It is predominantly what we do in our travel and tourism department. So that $3.5 million is being spent in this fashion. As you can see, 65% of that goes to actual marketing and promoting the county. The rest is in the staff and the operating costs to provide that effort. The 65% is broken down in this fashion. By far, the biggest thing we do is in internet marketing and social media, followed by print ads, television, and special promotions, business guides, and events. Tourism related, the remainder of the money, the 7.5, here is the statutory definition here on how these funds can be spent. One of the things we do with this portion of the occupancy tax is operate Heritage Park and the Whalehead Club. Here is the proposed budget for operating next year. What I would like to point out to you is you see under the revenues, the very last revenue is how much of this operation is quote-unquote subsidized by occupancy tax. You'll see there's a $561,000 figure there. I wanted to report this to you because historically that had been about $800,000. And so we made a promise to the board when we took over operations that we could operate at less cost and generate more revenues, and we continue to do that. And it puts about $230-some thousand of occupancy can be used for other programs and other services. And so we're continuing to meet that mandate of operating it at a reduced cost. The balance of the tourism, the tourist related, is in these 5 services. These 5 things make up 80% of the remaining funds. It is to provide additional coverage of emergency medical services, additional ambulance and personnel that's required with the influx of the summer traffic or population. The Sheriff's Department also increases and upstaffs for the season. One of the largest capital project is the next one that has been discussed for some time, is building a facility at Heritage Park. When we took over the operations, we inherited about 25 to 30 historic boats that have operated in Currituck Sound. They have been restored over the years by the Whalehead Trust. They need a place to be displayed as well as to be protected. And so with the residual funds being transferred to us from the trust and this appropriation, we can move forward with putting that building on the ground. The fourth thing there is the lifeguard services. And the last one is connecting Corolla is $442,000. Under that number, we have an initiative. In fact, we've already got the consultants on board. We are doing a plan for a beautification of NC-12 plan to address additional signage needs, landscaping needs along NC-12. We'll be looking at the interconnectivity between Bonita, NC-12, and the public access in Bonita. There's a public parking lot. It's the last parking lot that has not been improved, as well as a pedestrian access. We need to make, so we're targeting that for improvements. We've installed a concrete structured handicap access at the Corolla Village Lane. We want to have 1 year of experience to see how that operates. If it does well, we would be looking to provide a similar structure at some of our other public accesses. Just like with the remaining county budget, I'm presenting this budget to you tonight. I am requesting that you set a public hearing and potential approval for June 5th. And in any fashion, the board has to adopt this budget by July 1st. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have about this. This budget also is on the county website for the folks to go back and look and review, as well as it's in the binders that will be displayed in my office for both the public and the general press. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Dan, the connecting Corolla, that's just all part of the walkway system, is that correct?
It is part of several years ago, the planning department undertook a planning effort where we brought consultants in that worked with the community to look at how to improve the walkability of Corolla, how to handle or how to address the pedestrian flow, the interactivity between the retail areas, the beach, between the retail areas and Heritage Park and places of interest. So part of that was building the backbone on NC-12 of the multi-use path. Mm-hmm. Now we're looking at how to take that multi-use path and interconnect it with these various different places of interest throughout Corolla. And now that is the next step, what we're going to start looking at now is how to go back in with landscaping and to improve the overall look of NC-12. There's certainly some right-of-way areas that we can do some improvements. Part of that plan is to reach out to the plan unit developments to see if they would be willing to come forward with some of their open space. Several of those communities have open space adjacent to the DOT right-of-way. There might be opportunities to partner with them to bring additional landscaping that's beyond just the right-of-way. So we want to engage those communities in efforts to see if we can do that. But there's opportunities to again, through landscaping and improvements to, again, just to continue to improve the quality of Corolla and experience our guests have when they come.
Thank you.
Mr. Scanlon, as far as the historical boat preservation fund that you had up there, was there a portion of that designated for a structure for housing the boats to be constructed
That is what that is.
That full money is going to go towards that.
That is. That
Okay.
is. The previous Board of Commissioners actually created an advisory task force that has actually had a couple meetings to look at laying out the over how, when you talk about display, how to display them. So they have been working. The location at Heritage Park, we're looking to put these, is where the bathrooms are by the lighthouse. Those bathrooms have age on them and need to be upgraded. So before we went forward with taking those out and putting this new facility in that will have public bathrooms in it, we wanted to get the other bathroom facility done so that we maintain at all times public restrooms on the site. So now that that bathroom is done, we can move over and go back and focus on taking out the bathrooms that are there, putting this facility in, and this facility will have public restrooms as part of its overall design.
Any further questions? With that, I'll look for a motion to set a date.
Make a motion that we have the public hearing for the TDA budget on June 5th.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Mr. Scanlon, were you to discuss the TDA budget amendments?
Or were they more consent?
Let me get to them, and I will. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
You have two budget amendments in your agenda package. The first one is to move monies around within the tourism department, the operational department, to increase data transmission, which is we are paying a licensing fee for 2 different workstations, and we're looking to bring a third workstation on, and there's a cost associated with doing that. So it's to move the money in to provide that third station. And the second one is to provide monies for air conditioning repair at the actual Whalehead House. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have on those.
Hearing none, I'll look for a motion.
Motion for approval.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Mr. Scanlon, were we going into the Ocean Sands budget amendment, or did we decide not to do that?
We will go ahead and... Yeah. You have a budget amendment in your package tonight, too, also for the Ocean Sands Water and Sewer District.
If I can, I need to recess?
Yes. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
I was just making sure we were going into that before I did that. With that, I'll close the special meeting of the Travel Tourism Authority and open the special meeting of the Ocean Sands Water and Sewer District Board.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You have a budget amendment. Now, you're sitting as the Ocean Sands Water and Sewer Board. You have a budget amendment. It is a operational budget amendment now that we're getting close to the end of the fiscal year. It does not increase the budget, but it is a budget amendment to move funds, money around within budget line items. You can see those line items mentioned in the budget amendment in your package, and I'll be happy to answer any questions specifically you might have about these items.
Hearing no questions, I open the floor for a motion.
Motion for approval.
Second.
Got a second from Mr. White.
Move it along.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. With that, I will close the special meeting of the Ocean Sands Water and Sewer District and reopen the Board of Commissioner meeting and call for a motion to adjourn.
Motion for adjournment.
Go ahead. You can have it.
Second. Okay.
Second from Mr. Payment. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously.